надо до Бугаси, видите, в того в Бугасе безопасно. Там люди, и там уже безопасно. Длинный все в порядке, не ездит туда через два дня. Ну, а кто за них отвечает? Давайте, детей покормите, порадуйте. Все, счастливо.
Работаю! Выстрел! Пускай еще работают! Еще пусть работает! Еще! Еще пусть работает! Драго! Выстрел! По мне работают!
Перестрелка в посадке. Всем привет! Это проект Варгонза, и мы продолжаем. Все подробности эксклюзивно на Донбасском фронте. Мы сейчас непосредственно в Волновахе. Продолжается зачистка города. И вот сейчас информация о том, что противник на правом фланге скапливает технику. И, возможно, для того, чтобы контратаковать или же выйти на прорыв своим. Напомню, Волноваха уже несколько дней.
в Чернобаевке, пиздец. Как не стреляют?
This is blogger Nikita Dementov. He lives in the eastern city of Kharkiv, and he's explaining to his followers how their donations are being spent to help civilians on the front line. Across Ukraine, along shifting front lines from the north to the east and to the south, civilians are under attack. When they emerge from basements and shelters, as here in the town of Irpin, close to Kiev, it is often to a landscape they can neither recognize nor comprehend. Homes destroyed, hospitals overwhelmed, heating, water and electricity cut off, and with limited avenues of escape. That's why safe passage is so important now. Humanitarian corridors out of Volnovakha and the port city of Mariupol in the south failed on Saturday because of continued Russian attacks. Negotiations are said to be ongoing. Ukraine's resistance has done much to slow Russia's ground advance, so heavier firepower is being unleashed from the air. Yet the Ukrainian government's urgent calls for a no-fly zone have gone unanswered, which explains this angry warning by President Volodymyr Zelensky to the NATO alliance.
All the people who die from this day forward will also die because of you, because of your weakness and because of your lack of unity.
NATO is not willing to shoot down Russian aircraft and risk being drawn into a wider war with Russia, so Ukraine must act alone for as long as its air defences last. This is cockpit video from a Russian helicopter gunship, and this is the sort of response Ukraine's army is able to deliver. One helicopter gunship down. And in the north, a Russian warplane is downed, its wreckage smouldering among suburban homes. For those who do make it out of besieged and bombarded parts of the country, it is to Lviv that many come, for now a place of safety behind the lines. Irina and her boys have fled Kharkiv, leaving husband Ruslan behind to fight. It is a feature of war that some are inspired to act with great courage. In this case, a 7-year-old Dima, comforting his mum.
We are scared, the children are terrified, and they don't know why they need to leave their home. I don't understand why I need to run away and leave my husband behind. We left him alone to protect our city.
Moscow says it is not attacking civilian targets. The claims to the contrary are fake news, that the destruction in city centres and residential areas across the country is the work instead of Ukrainian forces and saboteurs. Try telling that to the people here. Try saying it to the people under occupation in the south of the country, in places like Kherson and Berdyansk, and on the route of Russia's advance in Zaporizhia. All three places saw large protests on Saturday against the presence of Russian troops. And try telling Irina and her children that Russian forces are liberating Ukraine, as they claim, from Nazis and nationalists, as they make their way into a bomb shelter, even here, where they'd hoped to escape the war. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, Lviv.
Серце розривається, діти не встигли виїхати. Внучки, внуки. Зараз йду пішком через весь город. Попробуємо щось думати, кудись виїжджати. Бійся від безсилля, не знаєш, я знаю, хто стояв, в лоб би кого-то бити.
Да, я уношу то, что осталось живое, целое. Выношу все оставшиеся вещи. А так вообще ничего нету. Куда? В бомбоубежище. Вчера здесь трупы одни лежали. Вот здесь люди стояли в аптеке. Вот здесь стояли в аптеке. Вот здесь вот лежали везде трупы. Много людей погибло, много молодых ребят погибло.
Приблизно о 12:20, 12:30 в нашу школу потрапила ракета з літака. Частину школи зруйнувала, були жертви, були поранені, тяжко поранені. Ми отримали наказ роз'їхатися по осередках тероборони в своїх районах. І майже хвилин за 5-7, як виїздити, по нас вдарили ракетами з касетними зарядами.
Це 18-та школа, місто Чернігів.
Gunfire lit up the sky over Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Enerhodar in southern Ukraine. The Ukrainians say heavy shelling by Russian forces set off a huge fire in a building on the site.
As a result of strikes, there is a fire at the nuclear power plant. I repeat, as a result of strikes by the Russian Federation forces on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, a fire has erupted.
It took firefighters 4 hours to put out the blaze. Emergency crews reportedly coming under fire from Russian troops who seized the area after fierce fighting. World leaders condemned the attack as reckless. Ukraine's president accused Russia of what he called nuclear terrorism.
We survived the night that could have stopped the story, the history of Ukraine, the history of Europe. Russian troops attacked Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe. It alone could be 6 Chernobyls.
Calming international fears of a catastrophe, nuclear monitors in Vienna said the plant's reactors were secure.
We, of course, are fortunate that there was no release of radiation and that the integrity of the reactors in themselves was not compromised.
The Kremlin denied attacking the plant and blamed it on Ukrainian saboteurs. 9 days into Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, Russian troops continue to push into the country. Moscow says these pictures show its tanks near Kyiv. For days, a 60-kilometre-long military convoy has stopped outside the capital for reasons that still aren't clear. But it's fueling anxiety and fear in the city. Some wonder how their lives could have changed so fast.
This is a genocide against Ukraine, the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian land. It is simply awful. Scenes like these are fired at homes all over the country.
Cities including Kharkiv in the east and the strategic port of Mariupol on the Sea of Azov continue to be pounded by Russian shells. Schools, homes, hospitals all hit, contradicting Moscow's claims that it's not targeting civilian areas.
And we will not surrender. We will stand here on our land in our city for as long as it takes.
Among the destruction, many ordinary Ukrainians continue to resist. Others are desperate to leave. The UN says that at least 1 million people have fled Ukraine for neighbouring countries since the Russian invasion began more than a week ago. Thousands of people have passed through the city of Lviv. It is not far from the Polish border, and they just keep coming.
We are very scared because our parents are staying here.
I hope it's not all our last days of our life, I mean for all the world.
Ukrainian and Russian negotiators agreed on Thursday to set up humanitarian corridors. No word yet, though, on how or when these would be implemented. In the meantime, people across the country live in fear, face uncertainty, and a new generation is growing up with another war. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Lviv, Ukraine.
We travelled south of the city of Zaporizhia. The road behind me is the road that it was expected, perhaps optimistically, to see buses of civilians being transported out of Mariupol, taking them north to Zaporizhia. That didn't happen because the ceasefire failed. The road has been very quiet. We've seen the occasional car carrying children north. We've also seen a lot of military, interestingly, checkpoints that we've seen earlier in the day, now abandoned, and Ukrainian tanks heading towards Russian positions, we've been told, are only around 20 kilometers south of here. We've been speaking to villagers in this area. They tell us that the situation has deteriorated dramatically today.
This group of people said they had never heard shelling as intense.
Our parents always said we were born during the war with the Nazis and we would die during a war. I hope the soil rejects Putin's dead body. How is it possible? They are our next of kin. How can they do this? My relatives are in Russia. We have their blood and they have ours.
There's no electricity. We have no idea what's going on around us. My son is fighting in Donbass. I haven't heard from him for 4 days. I don't even know if he's still alive.
The owner of this car says a shell destroyed its wheel as he tried to drive his family to safety.
It hit here and smashed the wheel. The Russians are shelling, even though they saw cars with signs saying children inside.
Driving back north to Zaporizhia, the roads were quiet. Ukrainian tanks headed south. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, near Zaporizhia, eastern Ukraine.
As Russia's war machine rages across Ukraine, the verbal offensive coming from Moscow is no less powerful. President Putin issued a clear warning to Western powers, saying any attempt to create a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be considered a direct military involvement in the conflict against Russia.
Now we are hearing that a no-fly zone must be established over the territory of Ukraine. It is impossible to do so over the territory of Ukraine itself. It is possible only from the territory of some neighboring countries. But any move in this direction will be viewed by us as a participation in the armed conflict.
Putin made it clear he wants Ukraine to have a neutral status in the power balance between NATO and Russia. This, he says, requires a demilitarized Ukraine, because its Western backers are intending to supply it with nuclear weapons if not stopped.
They will arm those systems, and from that second on, from that very second, Russia's fate will be very different. Because then our strategic enemy won't even need intercontinental ballistic missiles. They will have us at gunpoint right here. How can we overlook that?
Putin said everything is going according to plan in Ukraine, and his army will achieve all of its objectives. His foreign minister Sergei Lavrov had some harsh words for the Ukrainian president.
If Zelensky's so unhappy with NATO not interfering, then that means he's hoping to resolve this conflict by involving NATO. It means he's not hearing statements from European capitals saying they won't get involved. It means he wants to provoke a conflict between NATO and Russia.
Perhaps the most challenging issue for Russia right now is the economic measures the West is imposing. In this regard, President Putin says Western sanctions are akin to a declaration of war on his country. Foreign Minister Lavrov has warned of consequences and singled out the UK in particular. He says Moscow's response to the sanctions will without doubt hurt British interests in Russia because, in his words, the UK has chosen to move towards a direct confrontation with his country. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera.
On the roads of eastern Ukraine, there are those taking their children to safety, an endless slug of cars trying to reach the closest border. It will take days. And there are those staying behind to defend their country, like these men we met near the village of Mirny. They know the forest well. They usually go hunting here, but now it's time to dig trenches, fill up sandbags, and build bunkers in case the Russian soldiers come their way. They are part of the locally formed territorial defense units. They include seasoned men like Anike, not his real name, who first joined in 2016 to fight the pro-Russian separatists in the east of the country.
You're asking about our mood, if we're ready to defend ourselves after this treacherous invasion of Ukraine. Women, children and the elderly are suffering. Homes are bombed at night. Of course the army is very angry about that. We didn't provoke and we didn't want this war. They came to us and we're ready to answer.
He hopes that the Russians could be slowed down with these handmade spikes.
Similar positions are being built a bit all over the Dnipro region, and it's become even more urgent now to have them completed because the region has become the first stop for those fleeing the Russian advance from either the south or the northeast of the country.
200, At the village, Ludmila is busy cooking 200 meals. On the menu today, rasonik, a hearty soup that will be put in jars and taken to the checkpoints and trenches, where her husband is also on duty. For some of these women, this war is hitting close to home. Oksana's son-in-law is in the regular army, on a front line. She can't reveal which.
My daughter is keeping busy like me, just to not go crazy. It's our country. We have to protect it. We will leave, but it's hard. What can I do? We are all in the same boat. And what can I say about the soldiers who came to our country to kill us and pretend they didn't know? They have been here for more than 7 days and they still don't know.
Back in the forest, the territorial defense gets ready for the cold night ahead. The Russians are still far away. But this is a war of missiles and rockets that are devastating cities and villages. And here, there are no signs of modern weaponry that could repel the onslaught. For most Ukrainians, the only safe way is to go west and get as far as possible. Abdelhamid, Al Jazeera in eastern Ukraine.